Goonhammer has partnered with Legalized Mischief to present you with Colin Ward's long-form painting videos. Like and subscribe, and follow Legalized Mischief and Goonhammer for more hobby tutorials.
Hey everyone, it's Colin with Legalized Mischief Productions. Thank you for joining me and welcome. And today I'm going to be talking about edge highlighting and just techniques for edge highlighting and really focusing on the brush technique and not so much on colors or, I'll talk a little bit about lead edge highlighting, what I call lead edge highlighting. But I'm working on these Ultramarines Rhinos, and it's a great opportunity to talk about just the technique of edge highlighting. There's obviously a lot of edge highlighting to be done on this model, so I wanted to take this opportunity to film this while I'm working on it as a isolated tutorial just dealing with edge highlighting. So the result that we're going for, excuse me, I finished up some of these turrets already, and you can see just how crisp those edge highlights are, how much it really adds to the model with that nice color modulation there, those nice blends and fades. I love painting Ultramarines. I've painted a million Ultramarines, and I still love it. It's just such a great scheme, and it really just lends itself so well to, just really nailing those airbrush steps and then getting a good crisp edge highlight. And you get that factory fresh, super clean, Ultramarines look. So the white also has an edge highlight on it. It's a little harder to see until you get back into the gray, which is where you can really see it. But I wanted to show those kind of crisp edges on the blue on the turret is what we're going to be doing today. And I'm going to show you how to achieve that. I'm not going to highlight this whole tank because that's going to take a minute. It doesn't take too long. Once you get into the groove and once you get confident with edge highlighting, it doesn't take forever. I knocked out those turrets in a few hours. And that's including, doing the metallics and everything. So it's definitely a really good tool to have in the arsenal. For example, getting these little razorback pieces done up as well. These will sit in the tank and just have a really nice, crisp look to it. So the important thing is getting a good brush and a good consistency on the paint. So what we're looking at here is a GW medium layer brush. This is what I use for most of my painting. I don't really like ordering brushes online. I like being able to look at a brush. These are also very cost effective. These are only about $8, and they last a pretty good while. And then once they're done, they can move into more of a layer brush. Once they're done, like holding a point, they can move into more of a layer brush and then onto, kind of a dry brushing brush. You can extend the life by just keeping them around and using them for different things. So I use a medium layer brush because it has a good body and it has a nice tip. It's about a size 1 typically. If you were, like I have Winsor & Newton. This is Winsor & Newton Series 7. This is a size 1. It's a little bit bigger than the GW medium layer, and you can see how much fatter the belly is. The belly is this part right here, the part in the middle. And it holds a very, very sharp point. I've had this brush for a long, long time. I don't use it a ton, but this Winsor & Newton brush, they definitely last longer. There's no two ways about it. They definitely last longer than the GW brushes. but they're also about $16, $17 a piece, whereas the GW brushes are $8 a piece, and I can grab them off the shelf at the game store. So for me, those are distinct advantages to the GW brush. So as we can see, there are a ton of edges, edges and rivets. And what we're going to be using is Deep Sky Blue from Vallejo Model Color. And I get that on the palette, and I'm really mixing that down with water to where I get a really nice consistency with that paint. You can see how thin it is. We really want this to be thin, because the thinner the paint is, the easier it's going to get drawn out of the belly of the brush. And that's really the key. We don't want to apply a lot of pressure when we're edge highlighting. We want to let the paint and the brush do a lot of the work for us. If we apply a lot of pressure, that's when we get those thicker lines, and that's not what we're going for. We're going for a nice thin, crisp edge highlight. And I'll demonstrate kind of the theory behind this, or why this works as well as it does and how it does. And it's because the brush is round, and the surface that we want to put the edge highlight on is like a flat corner, basically. So just kind of zoom out here. So let's say we have this corner that we want to put this edge highlight on, and we have a round brush. We don't want to come in and try and paint that edge like that. What we want to do is we want to use, because this is round, we want to just lay the brush on that corner and just very gently just draw it along the corner. And you can see how little surface area is touching that brush. We don't want to come up here and try and paint the corner, because it's going to leave a lot more area painted than we want. And so when we use this kind of round object, the paintbrush, to paint a sharp corner, we're only getting a very, very, very small area of contact. And because we're not putting a lot of pressure on the brush, so the brush is soft. So if we were to put a lot of pressure on the brush, for example, the brush is going to squeeze down like that, and it's going to cover a lot more area, and it's going to be more uneven. But if we just gently lay the brush on there and just kind of drop a little bit of paint off, then we're going to get a really nice, crisp highlight. So you can see how little area we're really touching with the body of the brush. And that's what we're going to concentrate on. And we can use different parts of the brush to do highlights, right? So if we want to paint a very thin line, like let's say there's an area where the resin is kind of meh, and it doesn't really have a sharp edge, but we need to get, so like right on this corner here, that resin's a little flat. It's a little meh. There's not really a sharp edge right here. So we may have to come in here and just try to go like that and paint a straight line. That's not going to be as fine a line as here on the other side, where you can see that that's a lot sharper edge. Like this plastic edge here is kind of rounded. That's not going to be as sharp of an edge as the side of this door here, which is less rounded. So it's just things like that that are going to affect the line that we end up getting, but it'll be pretty consistent. So if we want to do a straight line, we can just, brace and then just really carefully, And that's something I'm not fantastic at, is getting a perfectly straight line. It's really, really hard to do. But for the most part, we're going to be using the brush. Oh, adjust my camera now that I zoomed out. We're going to be using about like a third of the way down the brush, halfway down the brush. Oh my gosh, what's going on? There we go. I'm using about a third of the way down the brush, halfway down the brush to kind of drop off that paint. Let me adjust this because I think my focus just went a little crazy. There we go. So we're going to be using about maybe like a third of the way down the brush, maybe even halfway down the brush to get that. And if we want to get into a sharp corner, like up here, well, I would just flip this. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I would just flip this to get that line there. But let's say we want to get in here, right, where we don't really have a great angle. We're going to get a lot closer to the tip of the brush, but we're still going to use the side. We're still going to use the side of the brush. We're just going to use the tip. Very, very close to the tip, but we're still going to use the side. We're not going to switch to like just painting that corner because it's going to give us a really inconsistent line. Same thing where we want to get an edge highlight in here. Well, obviously we can't really get the brush in there, so we're going to use the side of the tip to get in there without going so deep that we paint that recess. That's like the last thing that we want. So let me show you and get some paint on this brush and show you what I mean. So again, consistency, that's a little thick. Some more water in there. And deep sky blue is a great paint because you can thin it comes out a little thick, but you can thin this forever and it shows up. But you can see just how thin that paint is. And I mean thin as much as you think you should, and then thin a little bit more because this is really, 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 you see it's not even covering the previous deep sky blue, and that's what we want. It's all about getting the consistency to where it will get drawn out of the brush on its own, where you're not going to have to force it, you're not going to have to push. So let me get situated here. So we're using just about a third of the way down the brush to get a nice crisp edge. And I try to position the model so that really I'm just repeating the stroke over and over and over again. I'm pulling the brush towards me. I'm not pushing the brush because pushing is going to lead to putting more pressure on the brush. And remember, that's not at all what we want. We do not want to be putting a lot of pressure on this brush. We want the paint to do the work for us. And I'm not going to, like you can see, I'm not going to shove this brush into that cavity there. I'm just going to use, you see how much closer we are towards the edge, towards the tip of the brush, but we're still using the side of the brush. I'm not using the tip of the brush if I can avoid it. The other nice thing about using such thin paint is it has a longer working time on the brush. So I can get a lot more edge highlighting done before I have to reload. And for something like this little knob here, again, we're just going to use the tip of the brush, make sure we have a good angle. So we don't want this, if this is too flat, I'm going to get paint on the top of that. If it's too shallow, I'm going to get paint on the front. I'm not going to get a good line. So I want to keep it pretty even at a pretty even angle to get that nice sharp line there. Same in here. You know, I don't have a lot of room in there, but I want to highlight these vent sections. So I'm still using the tip of the brush, or excuse me, I'm still using the side of the brush very close to the tip. And you can see here I'm doing a little lead edge. I'm sneaking a little lead edge in there. So I highlighted this edge and the tops here, but I not these two here, because if the light is coming kind of from this direction, this edge is not going to catch light. That edge isn't going to catch light. This edge isn't going to catch light. And now when it comes time to do these rivets, which I do because I'm insane, we just use the tip of the brush and we just put a little dot on top of the rivet. You can see I'm bracing the tank on the table. I'm bracing my finger on another part of the tank. My wrist is on the desk. So really the only thing that's moving is the brush. Nothing else is moving. The tank isn't moving. And that lets me get more accurate paints, more accurate lines, more accurate brushwork. So again, like on this walkway here, now we can move, we have the room, so we can move towards the middle of the brush and just drop off a bunch of paint. And now we have these little, you see where these little angles are here? Again, middle of the brush, make sure, and this is where, it's really important to have a good angle. Because if it's too shallow, it's going to just drop off a ton of paint. If it's too steep, it's going to drop off a lot of paint on this side. So we want to make sure to get perpendicular to that line and just boop, easy peasy. Now this looks a lot easier. Hopefully I'm making it look easy, because that's kind of my job. But this is just a lot of practice and a lot of repetition. I love edge highlighting. I think it's a fantastic technique. I think it adds a lot to models. It really gives them that finished look. Now, coming back in here, we're going to have to go really steep at the angle, and we're going to have to work really with towards the tip of the brush. And here I'm going to go all the way down. This is like repeating that stroke, right? I'm going to go all the way down the front parts that I want to highlight. Then I'm going to turn the model, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to get all of those direction lines at once. I'm not going to continually, I'm continually moving the model. I'm not going to move the brush to where now I'm trying to do this from underneath and then bring my hand around and do that from the side. I want to have consistency. So that repetition is what's going to get me a consistent result. So again, just very, very lightly working our way around. Kind of hit that rivet there, drop down here. Top of that, come back over here. And this is the same stroke. This is the same brush stroke, just repeated on all these horizontal surfaces that I want to highlight. Kind of come back through, hit the rivets real quick. Want to get that one there. Rivet. Rivet. Want to get this line here. Get the side of the door, right? Now that door is starting to look pretty good, but now we want to get the inside of this door over here because that's going to catch more light. And since this door is kind of a central element, we're going to just go ahead and just hit that other side there a little bit just to really frame that door nicely. I love painting Ultramarines. I really do. These are great. It's a great scheme. And people give it a lot of grief, but man, this is fun. So then when we move on to, so I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to do this back part here because we kind of covered a lot of those elements already. But one thing I do want to cover is like these long stretches here. Oops, let's get this kind of resituated there. So these long stretches on these tanks are really intimidating. They're hard to get a good edge on. Again, very, very thin. Very, very thin paint. And we're going to take our time. We're not going to rush this. You don't want to rush this. But we're going to go deeper into the belly of the brush. We don't want to be near the tip because then if we get some wobble, then we're going to be in trouble a little bit. So we want to get back into the belly of the brush. Make sure we have a good angle. And because I'm just barely touching it, it looks like I'm going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But since I'm barely touching that corner, you get a nice edge. And this is challenging because for here, we can't get that nice angle that we want. If we try and get that nice angle that we were just using, we're going to hit that top plate. That's fine because we're going to edge highlight that top plate anyway. But here we have to be a little bit more careful and use the side of the brush near the tip. And that's not ideal. Like that's not as crisp as the rest of that line. So you can see there how that's what happens when you get kind of a not optimal angle on that edge is you get a little bit of that wave in there. It's not ideal, but sometimes it just can't be avoided. You can't get the brush in there at a good angle. And honestly, that's pretty good. That is not bad. I'm not like, I'm a little unhappy because, I always want to do, the perfect edge, but I'm not like going in and repainting that because it's terrible, right? But so you can see the difference when we do get that good edge, that good angle. You can see the difference. You see that little bit of wobble right there versus getting that good angle where there's none of that. And here that rivet is in the way, so we can just finish off that line just traditionally painting that edge. Same thing here. We're going to come up here, very shallow angle, and very, very lightly. You see, like, I'm not even hitting, like, a lot of these strokes aren't even hitting the edge because I'm trying to stay as light as possible. But there you can see, get a nice sharp edge, and then we'll carry that back around and continue on through. And even though that's not a lead edge back here, we want to highlight it because we want to finish off. We want to finish off that side of the model, right? We want to have that highlight around the model. So there. And kind of a byproduct of, if you know you're doing edge highlighting on a model, it will make you clean your models really, really well. And make sure that you're getting a good finish on your models. So here again, and then we just jump down here. We can get this edge here and kind of carry this around. So this is how we get more efficient without jumping around. And again, this edge is really important. Just boom, right across the top there. Get a nice crisp edge. And because we did that panel modulation, which I'll do in another tutorial, you can see this goes from dark to light here, which means the dark starts up here and goes to light there. And that edge highlight that we just did provides a nice break point between those two parts of that panel and really develops that interest. And like for these, again, using very, very close to the tip of the brush. We want to get that interior edge, and then we want to get the interior edge here and the back edge there. And that way, the lighting is consistent across the model. So we'll get the front of that little inset piece and then the back of the trim. Front of the inset, back of the trim. That way, we have consistent lighting across the model, and those are well defined, right? So we can see those inset pieces, we acknowledge them, we highlight them. Something that's tough is like these little parts in here. And those, again, just making sure we're at an angle. We don't want to be straight up and down. We're at an angle. Very, very close to the tip of the brush. And we highlight that little nubbin in there. This one's really tough. You can see this little angle right here. But we can come in from behind and get really nice and shallow. Boom, just hit it real quick. It's a little thicker than I would like because we didn't really get a great angle on it, but we just kind of have to live with it. Just the restriction of the model is what was kind of our undoing there. If we were doing a high level model, this thing would be in 1,000 sub-assemblies. And we'd make sure that each highlight was perfect and everything, but nobody got time for that. So you can see how like these edges on this kind of back plate here behind the viewports, this top plate, which a lot of people paint a different color, but depending on the scheme. The edges on this are softer, so they're not as sharp an edge, which is why we're not getting as sharp a line. If I was really, really good at hand painting straight lines, and I wanted to get a super sharp line, so you can see these lines are a little bit bigger than, like we get a good angle on the but the viewport here. You can see that these lines are bigger than these, like a lot bigger than these lines here on the side of the door. It's not because we messed up here. It's because these lines, these are soft edges, and these are very, very sharp corners. And that's just part of the model. I mean, there's not really a lot we can do about that. So, you know, it's not going to be perfectly consistent. Every line is going to be the exact same size unless we were to go in, and this is hard. This is just, again, I'm using the tip of the brush, but I have like maybe a millimeter's worth of play behind that. Maybe. So that's just these are just tough to do. You see it barely raised. But we need that highlight. We need to pick out those rivets and everything to give those elements their due, so to speak, and make sure that they show up on the model. So again, we're going to come here. These are pretty easy. We just boop, boop, boop. Kind of come around. Quick edge. And then these doors don't really, these caps here don't really stick out enough, so I'm not messing with that because that's more risk than reward there. If I try to get in there and highlight those, the odds of me messing that up and getting paint everywhere are pretty high, and I just don't want to risk it. So I'm going to make an executive decision and just not paint them. I'll not highlight them. The one highlight around the edge will be sufficient to get those pieces. So I'm not really going to worry about it. But you can see, like, once you get going, once you get confident with the stroke, and once you get confident with where you're placing those highlights, and this is a good example here. So because, oops, let's turn this over so we can get some reference here. Oh, my light is being so glary. But, so these are, we did the lead edge. These are pretty much straight on from the light. So we don't really want to get, but we don't just want to highlight that kind of front plate. I do want to give a little bit of nod, but I'm only going to the light going down the front there, but I'm only going to do about half. I'm not going to go all the way down to the plate, but I do want to make that kind of corner there. And again, coming in here. Boom, boom, boom. Get this top one here. Front here. Kind of draw this along the front here. Here. Top here. Top here. Top here. I can come back and do the rivets because I'm moving now. Inside here, inside there, there, front, top, turn it, front, 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 turn it, front, turn it, inside, reload. And this is where you can really start making some progress once you get comfortable with the stroke, is you really can just start moving. Now here we're going to have to come in because it's so soft. We're going to have to come in and try and paint a straight line. Close enough. And again, coming back to the outside. Boom, boom, boom. Here, outside, 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 down. Moving back here. And get that. Front, back, front, back, front, back, front, front, side, side. side, side. And we can knock out, I mean, I can knock out a edge highlighting a Rhino in, I don't know, 20 minutes maybe, without stopping to, well, you know, without stopping to explain everything, everything and demonstrate everything. If I'm just sitting here, you know, listening to an audiobook and just knocking it out, it goes really fast. But that's because I've done it dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So highlighting these circular pieces are interesting because you just do the front and then you do the inside of the back, and that really accentuates that circular shape. In these, we just give a little nod on the front there and come back down the side. Easy peasy. So again, making this look a lot easier than it is. But that's because I've done this so many times that I don't really have to think about where I'm putting these highlights. I just have to paint them because I know where they're going to go. So again, this little front rim here, but we're only going about 2/3 of the way. Oof, and that's what happens when you rush. So I just wet my finger and just wipe that off. See that little? So you can see this tank's looking pretty good. Even just, there's a little break here. So even just with that single edge highlight, and that's something that, you know, you can do a darker color. You'll see guys go through 2 or 3 colors on edge highlighting. Typically for gaming models, you know, I'm just doing the one because this looks, and if you get a good sharp highlight, you know, this looks pretty good. This is definitely more than serviceable for gaming model. I mean, this looks good, right? So I hope that was helpful. You know, I tried to demonstrate, you know, some different areas where we can do edge highlighting, but like the difference between this side of the tank here and this side of the tank here. This side just looks a lot, forget the back part here, but this side just looks so much more finished, so much more polished than this side, which looks good. I mean, it doesn't look bad. You know, a lot of, you know, edge highlighting work in there, obviously, a ton of edge highlighting work in the laurels there. But you can see just how much more finished this side looks. And that's what we want. And those are going to be pretty much done. I don't oil wash these Ultramarines because I didn't when I started painting it like 4 years ago. So these are just looking factory fresh. I'll do some transfers and these guys will be done. I have two more holes to do. But you can see, you know, we're going from this to this. And it's not that it's not difficult. It is difficult. Like, I don't want to undersell it and say that, oh, this is easy. You know, it's not easy to get used to. It's not easy to practice because, you know, you will make mistakes and it's frustrating. But the absolute key is that consistency of the paint and the angle of the brush to what you want to edge highlight. Those are the keys, and those just come from muscle memory, from repetition, repeating that stroke. So just to recap, very, very thin paint, a good angle, And for me, what's most comfortable for me is pulling towards me. So I drop off the paint when I pull, and then I pick up the brush, and then I drop off the paint. Move my hand, pick up the brush, drop off the paint. So for me, what's most consistent is pulling, dropping off the paint when I'm pulling towards me. That gives me the most consistent results. It may be different for you, but for me, that's what I do. Recommend trying it. And we're just holding, there's nothing special. We're just holding the brush the same way. We're just pulling, right? And so that's what we want to do there. When I do a full tutorial on either some kind of Rhino or Land Raider or Repulsor or something, I'll go over exactly where and why we highlight everything. But for this tutorial, I really wanted to showcase that technique, and I think this was a perfect model to do it on. So I hope that helps. I hope it's something that you try because it can add a lot of polish to your models. And over time, it gets easier, you get faster, and it's just a fantastic technique. So enjoy. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and we'll see you soon for the next one. Thanks.